The reason I'm finally telling this story is because 3 weeks ago, while standing alone in a grocery store aisle, my phone buzzed with a message from my mother's number, the same woman who once tucked me into bed, who once whispered prayers over my forehead, and the words on the screen said, "You're banned from Thanksgiving, idiot." I remember staring at those words until they blurred, not because they hurt the most, but because I realized something colder than heartbreak had finally settled inside me. The silence I'd been carrying for years was about to speak for itself before I began. If you've ever been betrayed, I hope you stay with me till the end. And please like and subscribe. Your support truly means more than you know. I didn't reply to that message. Not because I didn't have words, but because I had finally learned the power of not using them. Thanksgiving had always been complicated in my family. On the surface, it looked warm. Loud laughter, matching sweaters, group photos posted online with captions about gratitude and blessings. But underneath that polished surface, there was always tension wrapped tightly in politeness. I had learned early how to make myself smaller at the table, how to laugh softly, how to never bring up the things that made people uncomfortable, especially my success. I was the youngest, the surprise child, the one everyone underestimated, and later, the one they depended on. Quietly, no one ever talks about how betrayal doesn't always arrive screaming. Sometimes it comes disguised as entitlement. Sometimes it wears the face of family. By the time I was 26, I was paying for things no one acknowledged. Utility bills mysteriously addressed to my email. Credit cards temporarily linked to my account. Small favors that turned into obligations. I told myself it was love. I told myself this is what families do. You help, you sacrifice. You don't keep score, but someone else was keeping score for me. The text banning me from Thanksgiving wasn't sudden. It was the final punctuation mark at the end of a sentence that had been forming for years. The night before that message, I had quietly changed something. I remember sitting at my kitchen table, the overhead light humming softly, my laptop open, bank apps glowing in the dark. My hands weren't shaking. That surprised me. I felt calm, almost eerily calm, like a storm had already passed through my chest and left clarity behind. I removed my card from the electric account, then the phone plan, then the streaming services, then the emergency credit card my mother had borrowed for groceries 2 years earlier, and never returned. Each click felt like exhaling. I didn't announce it. I didn't warn anyone. I didn't threaten or explain. I simply stepped out of the role I had been silently cast into, the one who fixes everything without being thanked. When my phone started ringing the next morning, I ignored it. When the missed calls hit double digits, I turned my phone face down. When the number reached 87, I finally looked, all from family, and still, I said nothing. Growing up, my mother had a way of rewriting reality. If she hurt you, it was because you deserved it. If she crossed a boundary, it was because you forced her hand. Accountability never lived in our house, only guilt. So when that Thanksgiving text came through, it wasn't just cruel. It was familiar. You're banned from Thanksgiving, idiot. No explanation. No discussion. Just erasure. I imagined the table without me. My chair empty. My absence turned into a story where I was ungrateful, dramatic, selfish. I could already hear the narrative forming. I'd been cast as the villain long before I ever stopped paying the bills. What hurt wasn't being uninvited. What hurt was realizing how easily I had been disposable. I spent Thanksgiving alone that year. Not because I had nowhere to go, but because I needed to hear my own thoughts without interruption. I cooked a small meal. Nothing fancy. Just enough. I ate slowly. I cried once, quietly, and then I slept better than I had in years the next day. My mother sent another message. Longer this time, angrier. She talked about disrespect, about how family doesn't abandon family, about how disappointed she was. She never asked if I was okay. She never asked why I had pulled back. She only noticed when the comfort stopped. That was my first real realization. I had never been loved for who I was, only for what I provided. Weeks passed. Silence thickened. And then came the voicemail. Her voice cracked. Not with remorse, but with fear. Bills were overdue. Accounts frozen. Things were going wrong. She asked when I'd be coming to my senses. I didn't call back. Instead, I started rebuilding something they never expected me to have without them. A life that didn't revolve around earning love. I moved apartments. Changed my routine. Took on a project at work that terrified me. For the first time, I invested my energy into myself instead of damage control. And that's when the truth started leaking out. An aunt reached out, carefully, like she was stepping around broken glass. She asked, almost casually, whether I was really cutting everyone off financially. That's when I learned what they'd been saying about me, that I was selfish. That money had changed me. That I thought I was better than them. No one mentioned the years I carried them quietly. No one mentioned the sacrifices, the late nights, the anxiety, the way I had held everything together without complaint. I realized then my silence had allowed them to rewrite me, but silence, when chosen, not forced, becomes something else entirely. It becomes power. The calls didn't stop. They escalated. Some were angry. Some were manipulative. Some were almost tender. Nostalgia used like bait. I didn't bite, and then my mother left one final voicemail. Her tone was different, controlled, cold. She said something that made my stomach drop. Something that told me this wasn't just about Thanksgiving anymore. She said she knew something about me. Something she had protected me from. Something she could expose if she wanted. I sat on my couch, phone pressed to my ear, listening to her breathe on the other end of the line, and in that moment, I realized the betrayal ran deeper than money, deeper than insults, deeper than rejection. She had been holding something over me for years, and she was about to use it. Asterisk, I replayed my mother's last voicemail so many times that her pauses began to sound louder than her words. It wasn't what she said that unsettled me, it was how calmly she said it. Like she had rehearsed it. Like she'd been waiting for the moment when fear might finally pull me back into place. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay on my bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the quiet hum of my apartment, realizing how unfamiliar peace still felt. For the first time in my life, no one needed anything from me. No emergency, no bill, no crisis disguised as love, just silence. And yet, that silence was heavy with a question I couldn't shake. What did she think she had on me? Before I continue, if this story is touching something familiar in you, please stay with me till the end. And don't forget to like and subscribe. Your support truly means more than you know. The next morning, I woke up to messages from people who hadn't spoken to me in years, cousins, an uncle, even my older sister, the one who had stopped offending me long ago. Their words were carefully chosen, coded in concern but sharp underneath. They said my mother was worried. They said I was being extreme. They said family problems shouldn't be handled this way. No one asked what pushed me here. They only asked when I'd stop. That's when it hit me. This wasn't about reconciliation. It was about control slipping through their fingers. My mother had always been the storyteller of our family. She decided who was good, who was difficult, who deserved grace. And for years, I'd let her narrate me as the ungrateful daughter who never did enough. Even while I quietly carried the weight of her life, when she called again that afternoon, I answered not because I was afraid, but because I was ready to hear the truth. Her voice softened the moment she realized I was listening. She told me she didn't mean what she said. That stress had gotten to her. That family's fight. Then, like a blade sliding out of velvet, she reminded me that she knew things about my finances. About decisions I'd made in my early 20s, mistakes, vulnerabilities, moments I thought were private. She said it would be a shame if people misunderstood those things. I let her talk, and as she spoke, something inside me shifted from pain to clarity. She wasn't protecting me. She was threatening me. After the call ended, I sat very still. My hands rested in my lap. My heartbeat was steady. I realized I wasn't scared anymore. I was done. That night, I opened old folders on my laptop. Emails, statements, messages I'd never deleted because part of me believed I might need them someday. Proof of transfers. Proof of accounts opened under temporary circumstances. Proof of promises that were never meant to be kept. I hadn't been reckless. I had been generous, and generosity leaves a trail. What I found didn't just protect me. It told a story no one else wanted told. I also found something else. A document I'd signed years earlier, trusting my mother to guide me through it. I'd barely understood it at the time. She told me it was routine. Family planning. Nothing to worry about. Reading it now, my stomach twisted. She hadn't just used my money. She had positioned herself to access more. I realized then that the Thanksgiving text wasn't rejection, it was retaliation. She wasn't punishing me for leaving. She was panicking because I had. Over the next few weeks, the family tone changed. Anger gave way to concern. Concern gave way to nostalgia. Old photos were sent. Memories weaponized. Remember when? Became a way to drag me back into guilt, but every time I felt myself soften, I remembered the word idiot flashing on my screen. I didn't confront her. I didn't expose her. I simply stopped rescuing. Without my financial cushion, cracks appeared everywhere. Late fees, shut-off notices, awkward excuses. The family group chat went quiet, then tense, then desperate, and still I said nothing because silent revenge isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself. It lets people face the consequences of the roles they chose. One evening, my sister showed up at my door unannounced. Her eyes were tired, older than I remembered. She looked around my apartment, small, calm, carefully built, and I saw something flicker across her face. Envy. She asked how I was managing. I told her I was learning how to breathe again. She didn't apologize. She didn't defend me. She just said Mom was struggling and that maybe I could help just a little. That was the moment I knew my place in their lives had never been emotional. It had been functional. I told her no, not angrily, not dramatically. Just no. After she left, I cried, not because I regretted it, but because I finally accepted that love shouldn't require self-erasure. Weeks later, an envelope arrived in the mail. No return address. Inside was a photocopy of that same document my mother had once convinced me to sign. Except this time, someone had highlighted a clause in yellow, a clause I'd never noticed before, a clause that explained everything. I sat at my kitchen table, the paper trembling in my hands, realizing my mother hadn't just crossed a line. She had built her entire sense of security on the assumption that I would never walk away. And now, she was about to learn what happens when the quiet one stops carrying everyone else. Asterisk the moment I understood that clause, the one my mother never thought I'd read. I felt something loosen inside my chest. Not relief. Not victory. Something quieter. Something steadier. Clarity. It explained why she panicked when I stopped answering. Why Thanksgiving mattered so much. Why family suddenly became a weapon instead of a comfort. She hadn't banned me because she hated me. She'd banned me because she was afraid. Before I go any further, if you've ever been made to feel disposable by the people who were supposed to protect you, please stay with me till the end. And please like and subscribe. Your support truly means more than you know. For years, I had been the invisible pillar, the backup plan, the emergency account disguised as a daughter. Every "can you help just this once?" had stacked quietly on my shoulders until I couldn't tell where love ended and obligation began. That clause made it clear my name had been used as leverage, as reassurance, as a safety net she assumed would never be pulled away. But I had pulled it away, and the fallout was immediate. The missed calls turned frantic. Numbers I didn't recognize left voicemails filled with half-truths and rushed explanations. An aunt cried about how misunderstandings happen. A cousin warned me not to tear the family apart. No one asked if I was okay. They only asked if I would fix it. I didn't respond. Instead, I did something I'd never done before. I chose myself without announcing it. I met with a lawyer. Quietly, carefully, I brought every document, every email, every transaction I'd once justified as help. He didn't gasp. He didn't scold me. He just nodded slowly and said something I'll never forget. "You didn't abandon them," he said. "You outgrew being exploited." Those words stayed with me. When my mother finally showed up at my door, she looked smaller. Not fragile, exposed. Her confidence had cracked. And underneath it was someone who had never learned how to love without control. She didn't yell. She begged. She said families forgive. She said blood matters. She said I was cruel for doing this silently. Without warning, I listened. And for the first time, I didn't absorb her emotions as my responsibility. I told her the truth, not everything. Not angrily, not dramatically. Just enough. I told her I knew about the clause. I told her I knew why she panicked. I told her I wouldn't be participating anymore. She cried then. Real tears. Regret mixed with fear. And for a split second, I almost reached for her hand. But then she asked me what I planned to do. And I realized she still saw me as a resource, not a daughter. I wished her well, and I closed the door. The revenge wasn't watching her struggle. It wasn't seeing the family scramble. It wasn't the quiet satisfaction of being right. The revenge was peace. It was waking up without dread. It was holidays spent without bracing myself. It was realizing my worth didn't increase when I paid for someone else's comfort. Months passed. The calls stopped. The messages faded. The family learned to live without leaning on me, or they didn't. Either way, it was no longer my burden. I built a life that fit me. Small at first. Honest. Mine. Sometimes I still think about Thanksgiving. About how one cruel text cracked an entire illusion wide open, and I'm grateful because losing a family that only loved me for what I provided made room for a life that loves me for who I am. If you're listening to this and you're standing at the edge of a similar silence, wondering if walking away makes you heartless, it does in single quotes T. Sometimes it makes you whole.